Hi, welcome to Fright Flicks. I'm Nate,
I'm Jamie.
and this is the first ever review of Fargo.
Fargo, Season 2.
You see behind us, we've got the Murder Clowns logo. Jamie and I are the stars and makers of Murder Clowns, a Family Portrait. You can find a documentary about that and some previews here on the Fright Flicks channel. And on Halloween day, for that 24 hours, you'll be able to watch the movie for free. If you can't wait, and I hope you can't, go to my website, welcometostrangemanor.com. You can order a copy. I'll mail it out to you. We'll sign it, everything.
We also have books, posters.
Books, posters, all sorts of merch. Merch madness. But in any event, we're here to talk about Fargo Season 2, and this was Episode 3, the most recent episode. But I gotta tell you, I'm starting to... I was thinking of this episode as Season 2, Episode 1, Part 3, because although there are stopping points at the end of every episode, obviously good, and they're good act breaks, I'm not feeling yet like I'm seeing individual episodes.
I agree. It feels more like a movie in scope and in storyline. And just something that I wanted to clarify is we're not going to do necessarily a recap. This is a true review. So if you haven't seen the episode, hit pause, go watch the episode, come back and watch our review.
You know what? If you haven't seen it, go back, and we're not starting with the first episode. We're starting with Episode 3, because that's the one that we watched most recently, so it's fresh. But we're 3 episodes in. All 3 of these episodes have totally delivered. Fargo Season 1 was a huge favorite for Jamie and I both.
Absolutely.
It was fun. It was amazingly made. It had great acting. It had a great cast. Had it come out in any other year other than True Detective Season 1, it would have easily been the best new show of the year. But it came out against True Detective Season 1. So this one is coming out, Season 2 is coming out on the heels of True Detective Season 2, which was a step down in every possible way, in storytelling, in acting, in casting, in atmosphere. And then now Fargo Season 2 has stepped up in every possible regard.
Absolutely.
The storytelling is better, the casting is better, the acting is better.
Cinematography, I mean...
The atmosphere, it feels so much like a movie.
And by no means was Season 1 bad, as we just said, it was a favorite of ours, but you can tell that they know what kind of show they want to make. They've raised the stakes in every possible way that they could, they have. And so we're so excited to review Season 2, Episode 3, although again, not very much an episodic show. We're just starting at Episode 3 because this is where we
that's the one we just watched like an hour ago.
I need to get my notes. I have notes.
She does have notes.
I have notes.
Can you start with maybe, even without consulting your notes, what you liked about this week's episode?
What I liked about this week's episode, gosh, is really what I like about the whole show, to be honest. I mean, it feels authentic. There's so much attention to detail. It feels like a show from the 70s set in the Midwest. The colloquialisms, I can't ever say that word properly, the colloquialisms that they use, something that always tickles Nate is they approach this grisly, horrific murder scene and they say, well, look at this deal.
Isn't this a deal?
Isn't this a deal?
Yeah.
You know, just little things. And I guess because my grandfather's from the Midwest, I have that sort of near and dear to my heart, that they use those kind of expressions, and it feels, again, very authentic, very real. We are, needless to say, huge Coen Brothers fans. I think we own all of their movies. We've seen all of their movies. We love their style of filmmaking. And this feels like a Coen Brothers movie, although they are executive producers. I don't know what sort of hand they have in the show, but the showmaker, I think, really...
His name is Noah Hawley.
Yes, Noah Hawley. He is true to what the Coen brothers have created, and if you are a fan of the Coens and you're not watching this, maybe out of loyalty or dedication, don't do it. Dude,
you're so missing out.
You're
This is one of the best shows on television.
Hands down.
No doubt about it.
If you love the Coen brothers for their use of great music, you'll love that. The fact that they take their time to tell a deliberate story.
Deliberate is the exact word that I would have used. Some people might use the term slow. I wouldn't, because this is Fargo. It's not like Breaking Bad at all, but I would evoke this reference in that Breaking Bad knew the story it wanted to tell. It was in no rush to get there.
Mm-hmm.
If it was taking some tours off to the side, if it was slowing down, it knew where it was going. It went at its own pace. Fargo has that sort of, it's confident.
Yes.
It's confident storytelling. So yeah, it's deliberate, but we're going somewhere. They're laying down a path, and this is a thought I had while I was watching this episode. Each episode, each scene, really, this episode we really, for the first time this season, saw everything starting to come together.
Yes.
The Gerhardts and Patrick Wilson's character, Lou Solverson, and Kirsten Dunst and Jesse Plemons, like, everybody, all the storylines are starting to gravitate together, which is incredible, but it's doing it slowly. It's laying down, like, each scene is a stone. It's laying down a path, and the thought that I had was that it's such an amazing path where we're going, like, the scenery is so awesome that it doesn't even matter where it's going to me right now. Like I don't know who's going to solve the case, who's going to live or die. Right now, I don't really care what the ending is. I just want to see what the next part of the story is.
I agree. And I feel like that's so important in a show like this. You have faith in the showrunners. You have faith in the cast and in the direction in which it's headed. That's so important, and it keeps you engaged. And it keeps you really invested in the show. Like I said, despite the fact that they are taking their time, they're taking a slow burn approach. There's payoff. There's a little bit of payoff in every episode, but you're not getting big, explosive, dynamic. It's not a slick show. I feel like slick is a word that's thrown around a lot with a lot of...
I would say atmospheric.
It is. It's atmospheric, absolutely. But it's not, it's not cool. It's not... it's not trying to be sort of cute and winky at the camera. It knows where it's going. It's doing what it's doing, and it's telling a story, and it's unlike any other show on TV. Ergo, it's much better than a lot of shows on TV right now. This episode, we finally got some background on the Gerhardt family. They're an old, well-established crime family in Minnesota, and we got some background on them as far as they made their fortune, trucking and shipping, and they've also got their hands in gambling and some less on the above board side.
For my money, this episode really took a big step in not just establishing the history of the Gerhardts, but how badass they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's an entire family of badasses. Burn Notice's daughter turns out to be a badass.
He means the character named Dodd.
But more than that, it was the scene where Patrick Wilson and his buddy from law enforcement were driving onto the Gerhardt's ranch. Like, before, you had seen people come and go from their house. This time you saw somebody come and go from... Now they're in war mode. So there are armed guards at the gates. There are people with dogs and guns wandering. There are, like... These people are a for-real crime family, and they've got tons of guns.
Their operation is tight.
Yeah, so before we had been told, the Gerhardts are this crime family and they run everything. This episode, they actually showed us. Mm-hmm. They showed us visually, okay, these guys are for real a badass crime family.
And you mentioned Patrick Wilson's character, Lou Solverson. He comes to the ranch with his buddy, who's also in law enforcement. He's from the outside. His buddy is in the town, knows that this family basically owns the entire town.
And he knows to kiss their ass.
He's got this level of reverence and fear and respect and, ass kissery toward them. Whereas Lou's coming in from the outside, he doesn't back down. He even says at one point, he's like, I get that I'm supposed to be terrified.
I get that I'm supposed to be terrified.
But I'm not. That's his approach.
This was a great episode. This was the scene.
Oh, yeah.
The tension was there. a lot of these major characters who I actually didn't expect to come face to face yet. They came face to face, and they had this incredible standoff, and I wasn't sure if Burn Notice and Patrick Wilson were actually going to throw down
because
or not.
the thing about Burn Notice, aka Dodd, his character's name is Dodd, he is this just raging, he's full of testosterone and, piss and vinegar kind of guy, and he seems like the one who would go off half-cocked.
He seems like he's probably the most like his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's, and so to go up with him against Lou Solverson, who's very measured, very controlled, almost has a wry wit about him.
He's cloaked in, I'm on the side of right, so I'm just going to do whatever is right, and that's going to protect me. Which is, it's awesome, and it's brave, and it's also idiotic.
Absolutely. But
Go ahead.
But you also see that his influence comes out a lot in Molly Solverson, who was one of the very central characters to season 1. Between he and her mother, Betsy, you see where she gets her intellect, her her wry sort of sense of humor, her sense of right and wrong.
From Patrick Wilson, you get the vibe just like you did from Keith Carradine, who played her father in the first one, in the first season,
which is set in the future.
Right. Like his dogged sense of goodness. Like I said, he's right. He's cloaking himself in, I'm right. I'm doing the right thing. That's going to protect me. But this episode, where there was a great scene in the hair salon where it became obvious that Molly actually gets her smarts from her mother. Mm-hmm. And her mother laid out this elaborate crime scenario, which was 100% right.
Oh, she called it. She looked at three pieces of evidence and knew what happened.
It felt so much like Molly, And I had commented earlier in the episode that I liked that even though little girl Molly is in the show, they're not making her like super smart and
they allow her to be a child.
Yeah, she's just like any other kid. But now you see like she gets her smarts from her mom, and that was an awesome scene.
Very well played.
So there were a lot of highlights in this episode.
Molly's mom says to her father, Ted Danson, who's the sheriff.
Ted Danson, amazing as the sheriff.
He's great. This is a great role for him. She says, instead of looking for a man, you should be looking for a car. And Kirsten Dunst's character, I think Peggy is her name.
Yeah, I think so.
Peggy
and Ed
obviously gets so spooked by that because she knows that now they're somewhat onto her. If not onto her, onto the scenario which occurred, which spooks her, which led her to go pull out her husband, Ed, played by Jesse Plemons, who to me looks a lot like a fat Matt Damon. No offense to Matt Damon or Jesse Plemons.
Damon.
Okay, way to take my observation.
Yeah, I'll sneak in there and just steal that one.
It was mine.
Fat Damon is way better than fat Matt Damon.
Okay, well, I can't look at him and not see a fat Matt Damon. I'm sorry. The man's paunchy. I love you. I loved you in Breaking Bad, but you're paunchy.
And that's okay, because last episode, just to flash back real quick, he strips down to his tighty whities in front of the camera, and it was a bold scene, because either like Mac in Philly season 2, or Philly's, which was it, season 6 or 7?
Yeah.
Either he intentionally bulked up for the role, or he just let himself go. Whatever.
He tacked on mass.
He's way out of shape, and he stripped down to nothing in front of this camera for an incredibly unflattering scene, which gets him points in my book. It was real.
He's meant to be a butcher that lives in Minnesota in the late 1970s. He's not meant to be like a hard body. It resonates. It makes sense. But in any event, their story is ongoing. It ties in, obviously, to the greater story. They bug me, sort of, in a way. They bug me. I feel like they could have just gone to the police. I feel like he sort of lets Peggy just get away with these harebrained schemes.
If I may, I think that's because they kind of bug me, too, because everybody else on the show, and I mean everybody else on the show, outside of this one subplot we have going on, they're doing interesting things, they're caught up in an interesting story, they're also independently interesting. These two are not interesting in and of themselves. It's just the fact that they're caught up in this web of violence and coincidence. So they're in the show, and this makes them fish out of water, so it's fine for the story. But in terms of character, like every other character on the show totally pops, and these two, they're just kind of there.
Well, and again, going back to the Coen Brothers tie-in, if you're a fan of the movie Fargo and you remember Jerry Lundegaard, he also was a fish out of water. He was trying to play the big man. He was trying to play the, the criminal mastermind to obviously horrible consequences. But that's something that they do so well is they take people, and again, echoed in season 1 with Jerry Lundegaard. No, I'm sorry. Echoed in season 1 with Lester Nygaard. Excuse me.
Oh, yeah, he was very William H. Macy-ish.
Yes, and they've done that again, I feel like, with this couple, and also with the typewriter salesman Skip, who, spoiler, which by now should not be a spoiler, but he dies at the end of the episode rather unexpectedly.
Honestly, about halfway through the episode, he was getting so much FaceTime that I was like, oh, they're setting this guy up to... They're giving him enough FaceTime so that we care when he dies.
But after being grilled by Dodd Gerhardt, I was still thinking, like, there's no way he's just going to murder him now, but he does. But in any event, I think that, again, the showrunner and the writers of this show, they write that sort of bumbling idiot fish out of water, I'm in over my head character so well, and it's a nice homage to what the Coen brothers had created.
Yes. One of the strengths of not just the Coen brothers movie Fargo, but everything they have done is their strength in casting. And we've talked specifically about a couple of scenes in this episode that we really liked. There are a lot more that we just don't have time to get to. But what is making, for me, the writing is great, the directing is great, the story is great, but this cast is just so good. The cast is great, and it also ties into the writing, because there are so many amazing characters, and we're not getting too much of each.
No, we're not.
Ted Danson, Gene Smart, Bokeem Woodbine, Brad Garrett, Patrick Wilson... the list just goes on and on and on. Ron Swanson wasn't even in this episode.
Scene in I think the first or second episode.
There are so many great characters, and they're constantly just giving us a taste of each of them. So the show is doing a phenomenal job in pacing itself.
Absolutely.
But this cast and these characters are really, for my money, what is making this show one of the best shows on television.
And we haven't even talked about Mike Milligan.
Yeah, Mike Milligan.
He is killing it for me.
The actor's name is Bokeem Woodbine, and he is...
Kid's phenomenal. A kid, I mean, he's probably older than I am, but he is phenomenal.
Yeah, he's so good. And, like, out of nowhere. And the bad thing about Mike Milligan is that I'm getting the vibe, just like Mr. Wrench and Mr. Numbers from season 1, that he's the super cool character that's going to get iced really fast. You know what I mean? Do you get that vibe?
He's too much, too good, too fast.
Yeah.
He's not going to be in the entire show. I call it right now. He'll be gone. But the fact that he just is cool in every situation, and not cool as in, like, I'm a hip, awesome guy, which he is. He's just... Nothing phases him. Nothing has ruffled this guy's feathers.
Nope.
And he says things like, oh, Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers, we sound like a prog rock band. That kills me. It's hilarious.
And his quoting of Nixon was...
He does a great Nixon impression.
The exchange with him and Brad Garrett about the soft water. Yeah, northern water, it's slick.
And I travel with my own shampoo, and just these silly... Again, it's these silly, ridiculous, side... moments and exchanges, but it really just, I feel like it seasons the show and it just gives it this great flavor.
Yeah, it really does. Another great character moment for me this episode, and I wanted to do this quote because it really just jumped at me as being so great, is Ted Danson and his ongoing role as the sheriff. One of the things that's great about this show, this season in particular, is they've taken a lot of actors that are specifically known for their roles on television programs and cast them and given them roles where, like, when I don't think of Ron Swanson when I see Ron Swanson.
No, not at all.
And, the idiot brother from Everybody Loves Raymond, Brad Garrett, he's totally different in this. Jean Smart from Designing Women and all these.
I haven't even. I won't go into her.
And like and the guy from Burn Notice and Ted Danson from Cheers and CSI, and they're creating these new characters using these familiar faces. It's amazing. But Ted Danson, who has really been a standout to me, he has this scene where they're talking about Rye Gerhardt and how he's shot all these people at the Waffle Hut. And he says, "Oh, he's raised without proper moral fiber, I'm thinking. And all for what? A little money?" Which not only is a direct quote from what Molly Solverson says to the deaf guy in season 1,
Yep.
It's also a direct quote from what Marge Gunderson in the movie Fargo says to Peter Stormare in the back of, "Oh, and you do all this, all for what? A little money."
So there's
it's becoming like the running gag.
Another thread.
So it was a great callback, but it was also just like on its own in the context of the scene. It was a great line.
Another one of my favorite lines was, again, from Mike Milligan's character. He had just met Ted, not just, but he had previously met Ted Danson, and then he meets Patrick Wilson's character, and he says to them, "It's the way you're unfriendly. It's so polite." And I feel like they were both very, very hostile to this. Obviously, they know he's up to no good, so of course they're hostile to him. They're police officers, so they have reason to be hostile to this person who's nefarious, but they are also so polite, and I think he just hits the nail on the head, and I just loved that level of perception that he demonstrated and just so succinctly broke them down, and he's got their number.
Yeah, he does.
So.
I am going forward every week. We're both each gonna pick our MVP for the week. This is a most valuable player, the person that really stands out for any particular episode. I'm realizing now how incredibly hard it's going to be to pick an MVP for Fargo. There are so many great characters, but this particular episode...
Okay, wait. I feel like we need to say it at the same time, because if we pick the same one of us will be copying the other.
I think it's obvious. It's
1,
two,
2, 3. Lou Solverson.
Oh, Mike Milligan for me.
Oh, okay.
Mike.
No, it was very close. I thought, I don't know. If we had done this last week, I probably would have gone with Mike. Mm-hmm. Just because he had more face time, not because he was any less awesome. But Lou, this episode, because of his face down with the Gerhardts, and then just back to back his face off with the prog rock band Mike Milligan and the Kitchen Brothers, and then he goes home to his wife who's being treated for cancer, who's there with her father, and he just wants a piece of cake.
Yeah.
You know, I love me some Lou Solverson.
Okay, this is my take on Lou Solverson. Patrick Wilson, I've seen him do this in movies before, and I'm a huge fan of the actor. We're getting such great performances from this huge cast. I really feel like the actor and the writers, they're holding Lou Solverson back. Like, he's building up. As good as he was tonight, he is. He's great. I love Patrick Wilson. I feel this is the prelude, and like the last few episodes of this season, he's gonna just explode and be like the character of the show. And that's just because he could steal every single scene that he's in, and it seems like he's holding back. He's pacing himself. I picked Mike Milligan. Partially because I couldn't pick him for episode 2 because we didn't review it, and partially because by the time we get to episode 4 or 5, he's probably gonna be dead. So I wanted to give him some props now because he really...
He deserves it.
And I shouldn't say this for the obvious reason, but he really injects some color into the show.
He does.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Oh.
He pops.
Yes.
The guy pops. He does steal every scene he's in.
Every scene he's in. He's amazing.
He owns it.
So, I think that pretty much wraps up our review of Fargo. We will be back next week for a review of the next one.
Episode 4.
All right, now, here at Frightflix, and you know what? This is Frightflix YouTube channel. Normally, we do horror stuff or scary stuff or genre stuff. This doesn't qualify under any of those.
It's just too good not to review.
It's way too good not to review. And if you want to, jump in the middle, start with this episode, but you should start and watch from episode 1 of season 1 and just watch it all the way through. It's amazing. You're going to love it. Scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate tonight's episode?
I'll give it a 7.5.
You can't do that.
It says who?
Says me. Full number, 7 or an 8?
8.
Yes, I would give it... I would give it an 8 as well, and with the caveat of when the season is over and I go back and rewatch it, that may actually go up because it didn't give us like a beginning, middle, and end. It didn't feel like an episode of a normal show. It felt like, part of a larger thing.
Because again, this show doesn't feel like a season of a regular show. Again, they only have X number of episodes to tell their entire story. It's not an ongoing serial. It's more like a mini series.
So I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I actually kind of feel like I'm underrating it for the bigger picture, because if you were to put me on the spot and ask me to pick out the flaws and what I didn't like about this episode, I would be like,
I couldn't do that either, but again, it's only the 3rd episode. I can't give it 10. I don't have enough historical data to compare it to.
Sure.
We're not far enough in.
And also, we've seen 3/10 of something.
Yeah.
So
it's impossible, but it's a great episode.
It is. You should definitely check it out.
It doesn't feel like any sort of space filler whatsoever.
What were your thoughts on this episode? Or also, just to point out, if you'd like us to go back and review the first 2 episodes or start from the beginning of the show, just post a comment here or find us on social media at Frightflix on Twitter or Facebook. Also, I'm at Nateflix with an X, and she is at Wifey Knifey on Twitter. We will be back next week with more reviews of great stuff, and also check out our reviews of The Walking Dead. Also available on Frightflix.
Bye.
Good night.